The stars had been quiet for 300 years. Admiral Kextar looked out at the vast emptiness of space from his ship's bridge. The Zephyrian fleet moved slowly through the outer rim territories, checking old trade routes that nobody used anymore. "Sir, we're picking up something strange on the scanners," said his communications officer. The young alien's blue skin turned pale as he read the data. Kextar walked over to look at the screen. There, floating in space near a dead planet, was a massive structure. It was clearly artificial, but the design was unlike anything he had seen before. The metal was dark and smooth, with strange markings carved into its surface. "What do you think it is?" asked Dr. Velnash, the ship's science officer. She was one of the smartest beings Kextar had ever met, but even she looked confused. "I don't know," Kextar replied. "But those markings, they look familiar." The structure was huge, easily the size of a small moon. As their ship got closer, they could see that it wasn't just one building. It was a complex of connected structures, all built from the same dark metal. Some parts looked like they had been there for centuries, while others seemed newer. "Sir, I'm reading massive energy signatures from inside," Dr. Velnash reported. "Whatever this thing is, it's still active." Kextar felt a cold feeling in his stomach. There was only one species in the galaxy that built things like this. Only one species that had the technology to create structures that could survive in space for hundreds of years without maintenance. "Run a deep scan," he ordered. "I want to know everything about this place." The scan took several hours. When the results came back, Dr. Velnash's face went white. "Sir, the computer says these markings are human. Every alien on the bridge stopped what they were doing." The word human was not spoken lightly in galactic society. It was a word that came with warnings and rules that had been followed for 3 centuries. "That's impossible," said the communications officer. "Humans have been sleeping for 300 years. Everyone knows that." But Kextar knew it wasn't impossible. He had studied galactic history more than most. He knew that humans had once controlled a third of the galaxy. They had ships that could destroy planets and technology that seemed like magic to other species. Then, suddenly, they had stopped expanding and retreated to their core worlds. The official story was that humans had grown tired of galactic politics. They wanted to focus on their own development, so they chose isolation. Most aliens believed this story because it made them feel safer, but Kextar had always wondered if there was more to it. "Send a probe inside," he ordered. "But be careful. If this really is a human structure, we don't want to trigger anything dangerous." The probe entered through what looked like a docking bay. The inside of the structure was even stranger than the outside. There were vast halls filled with machinery that still hummed with power. Computer systems showed data streams in languages that the galactic translation systems couldn't read. As the probe moved deeper, it found something that made everyone on the bridge hold their breath. Rooms filled with sleeping pods. Thousands of them. And according to the life signs, they weren't empty. "Sir," Dr. Velnash whispered, "there are humans in there. They're alive." Kextar stared at the screen. Each pod contained a human in some kind of deep sleep. The technology keeping them alive was beyond anything the galaxy currently had. It wasn't just life support. It was perfect preservation. "How many?" he asked. "The probe has counted over 50,000 so far, and it's only scanned 10% of the structure." Kextar's mind raced. If this was just one facility, and there were 50,000 humans here, how many more facilities were there? How many humans were really sleeping in the dark corners of space? The probe continued its exploration and found something even more disturbing. Manufacturing facilities that were still running, automated systems that had been building and improving. Technology for 3 centuries without any human input. The level of advancement was staggering. "Sir, you need to see this," Dr. Velnash called out. The probe had found what looked like a central computer core. The screen showed streams of data flowing between different sections of the facility. But more importantly, it showed connections to other facilities. "There are more of these places," she said. "Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They're all connected in a network that spans half the galaxy." Kextar realized what they had found. This wasn't just a sleeping facility. It was part of a vast system that had been running in secret for 3 centuries. While the galaxy had assumed humans were simply isolated on their home worlds, they had actually been building something incredible in the shadows. "What should we do, sir?" asked the communications officer. Kextar thought carefully. The Galactic Council had one rule about humans that was never to be broken. Don't wake them up. For 300 years, this rule had kept the peace. But now they had discovered that humans had never really gone to sleep at all. They had just hidden themselves away while their machines continued to work. "We leave," Kextar said finally, "and we never speak of this to anyone." "But sir, this could change everything we know about—" "That's exactly why we don't speak of it," Kextar interrupted. "Some knowledge is too dangerous to share." As their ship moved away from the structure, Kextar couldn't stop thinking about what they had seen. The galaxy believed humans were weak and isolated. The younger alien species had started to question why everyone was so afraid of a sleeping race. Some had even suggested that the old warnings were just stories told to scare children. But Kextar now knew the truth. Humans weren't sleeping. They were waiting. And their technology had continued to grow while they waited. If they ever decided to wake up fully, the galaxy would be facing a species that had spent 3 centuries becoming even more powerful than they had been before. He filed his report as a routine patrol with no significant findings. The data about the human facility was encrypted and buried in the deepest security files. But he knew that secrets like this had a way of getting out eventually. And when they did, the galaxy would learn that the one rule about humans existed for a very good reason. Commander Zoltek slammed his fist on the conference table. The sound echoed through the grand chamber of the Dominion Coalition headquarters. Around the table sat representatives from 12 different alien species, all united in their growing frustration with galactic politics. 300 years, Zoltek shouted. 300 years we've been told not to go near human space. 300 years of treating empty worlds like they're still dangerous. It's ridiculous. The other coalition members nodded in agreement. They were all from younger species, races that had developed space travel long after humans had retreated to their isolated worlds. None of them had ever seen a human ship or met a human diplomat. To them, the old warnings seemed like ancient superstitions. "The commander is right," said Admiral Vortek of the Korthak Empire. "My scouts have been watching the borders of human space for decades. Nothing moves, no ships, no communications, no signs of any activity at all. Either they're all dead, or they've become so weak that they're not worth worrying about." Dr. Sil Ara, the Coalition's chief scientist, pulled up a holographic display. "According to our analysis, human technology was advanced for its time, but that was 3 centuries ago. Technology doesn't stand still. While they've been sleeping, we've been advancing. Our weapons are better, our ships are faster, and our armies are larger than anything humans ever had. The meeting was taking place on Nexus Prime, the Coalition's capital world. Outside the windows, massive warships floated in orbit. The Coalition had built the largest military force the galaxy had seen since the ancient wars. They controlled over 200 star systems and had billions of soldiers ready for battle. But the Elder Council still says we shouldn't disturb them, pointed out General Rixnall, though his voice showed he wasn't entirely convinced by his own words. The Elder Council is full of old fools, Zolthek replied. They cling to stories from before we were born. The ethereal conclave, the ancient ones, the wise speakers, they're all terrified of ghosts and shadows. They want us to believe that humans are some kind of sleeping gods who will destroy us all if we wake them up. Admiral Vortek stood up and walked to the large window. Look out there. See those ships? That's real power, not stories about what humans used to be able to do centuries ago. We have the strongest fleet in the galaxy right now. If humans really were as dangerous as the old tales claim, why haven't they done anything to stop us from building this force? The Coalition had indeed grown powerful. Their expansion had been rapid and successful. They had taken over dozens of systems that other species had claimed were too dangerous to settle. They had defeated several smaller alien empires and absorbed their territories. Success had made them confident, perhaps too confident. I've been thinking, said Dr. Sil-Ara. What if we're looking at this wrong? What if the humans aren't sleeping by choice? What if something happened to them? A plague, maybe, or a civil war. They could all be dead, and we're just avoiding empty planets because of old superstitions. This idea excited many of the Coalition leaders. If human space was truly empty, it represented the largest unclaimed territory in the galaxy. Hundreds of worlds, many of them perfect for colonization. The resources alone would make the Coalition the undisputed rulers of the galaxy. There's only one way to find out, Zolthek said. We send a fleet to investigate. Not to attack or invade, just to see what's really there. We call it a diplomatic mission or a welfare check. If the humans are still alive and powerful, we apologize and leave. If they're not, we claim the territory as abandoned and expand our empire by a factor of 10, Admiral Vortek finished. The vote was close. Several Coalition members were still nervous about breaking the ancient treaty that kept everyone away from human space, but the promise of vast new territories and resources was too tempting to resist. The final count was 7 votes in favor, 5 against. Just as they were about to make the decision official, the chamber doors opened. Ambassador Thylaron of the Ancients walked in slowly. He was old even by the standards of his long-lived species, and his presence commanded respect from everyone in the room. I request permission to address the Coalition, Thylaron said in his deep, careful voice. Zolthek wanted to refuse, but diplomatic protocol required that he allow the Elder Council representative to speak. You have 5 minutes, Ambassador. Thylaron moved to the center of the room. His ancient eyes looked at each Coalition member in turn. I have lived for over 800 years. I was young when humans last walked among the stars as an active power. I saw what they were capable of. I helped write the treaties that created the boundaries around their space. That was a long time ago, Admiral Vortek said. Things change. Yes, things change, Thylaron agreed. But some things remain constant. Human nature is one of them. They did not retreat because they were weak. They retreated because they were strong. Too strong. They recognized what they could become and chose isolation to protect the rest of us. Dr. Sil-Ara scoffed. That's just another old story. You have no proof that I have seen human ships tear apart moons with single shots, Thylaran interrupted. I have watched human soldiers defeat armies 10 times their size using nothing but clever tactics and superior equipment. I have witnessed human diplomats negotiate agreements so complex that it took our best minds years to understand all the implications. The room fell silent. Thylaran's voice carried the weight of personal experience, not just ancient legends. But most importantly, the old ambassador continued, I have seen what humans do when they believe their survival is threatened. They do not panic. They do not negotiate. They do not surrender. They adapt and overcome with a focus that is both admirable and terrifying. Zoltek was growing impatient. Even if that's true, it was centuries ago. No species can maintain that level of capability while sleeping for 300 years. Thylaran looked directly at him. Commander, you assume they have been truly sleeping, but has anyone actually verified that? Has anyone checked to see what is really happening in human space? The question hung in the air. The truth was that nobody knew what was happening in human territories. The boundaries had been respected so completely that there had been no contact of any kind for 3 centuries. Your point is noted, Ambassador, Zoltek said, but the Coalition has made its decision. We will send a small investigation fleet to determine the current status of human space. If they are still active, we will respect their isolation. If they are not, we will act accordingly. Thylaran shook his head sadly. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. I pray that you do not learn this lesson the hard way. As the ancient ambassador left the chamber, the Coalition members felt a moment of doubt. But their desire for expansion and their confidence in their own power won out. Within hours, Admiral Vortek was assembling a fleet for the journey to human space. None of them noticed that Ambassador Thylaran immediately sent an encrypted message to the deepest archives of the Elder Council. The message contained only 4 words. The children are stirring. Captain Mordak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Conquest, watching the blue and green planet grow larger on the main screen. Terra Nova had once been one of humanity's most important colonies, according to the old galactic records. Now, it looked peaceful and quiet, with no signs of the bustling civilization that used to live there. All scans show the same thing, Captain, reported his tactical officer. No active defenses, no ships in orbit, no energy signatures that suggest a living population. The cities are still there, but they appear to be empty. The Coalition fleet consisted of 50 warships, more than enough to handle any resistance they might encounter. But as they approached Terra Nova, Mordak couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The planet was too quiet, too perfect. Even abandoned worlds usually showed signs of decay after 3 centuries. Sir, we're receiving an automated signal, the communications officer announced. It's very weak, probably just an old beacon left over from when this place was active. What does it say? It's just repeating the same message over and over. Welcome to Terra Nova. Please identify yourself and state your business. The signal is in the old galactic standard language. Mordak frowned. An automated beacon wouldn't be working after 300 years unless someone had maintained it. But their scans showed no signs of maintenance facilities or active technology. Take us into orbit, he ordered. Deploy scouts to check the major cities. I want to know what happened here. The scout ships launched from the Conquest and descended toward Terra Nova's surface. The first city they investigated was New Geneva, which had once housed over 10 million humans. From space, it looked intact, but lifeless. Streets were clean, Buildings were undamaged, but there were no lights, no movement, no signs of life. Lieutenant Zareth led the first ground team into the city center. What they found was even stranger than what they had seen from orbit. The city wasn't just empty. It was perfectly preserved. Streets were clean as if they had been swept yesterday. Buildings showed no signs of weather damage or aging. Plants in the parks were well maintained, though they saw no gardeners. "This doesn't make sense," Zareth reported back to the ship. "A city can't stay this clean for 3 centuries without someone taking care of it, but we're not finding anyone." "Keep searching," Mordak replied. "There has to be an explanation." The explanation came when Zareth's team reached the city's central plaza. In the middle of the square was a large building that their scanners identified as the Planetary Administration Center. Unlike the other buildings, this one showed clear signs of advanced technology. Energy flowed through its walls, and complex computer systems hummed quietly in its depths. "Captain, you need to see this," Zareth called. "We found something big." Inside the administration building, the team discovered a vast network of elevators and passages that led deep underground. The technology here was far more advanced than anything in the Coalition fleet. Walls were made of materials that their scanners couldn't identify. Computer interfaces responded to touch with displays that showed information in languages they couldn't read. As they went deeper, they found the first signs of human presence. Not living humans, but evidence of a massive underground complex that stretched for miles in every direction. Automated manufacturing facilities produced goods with no human oversight. Transportation systems moved materials through tunnels that connected to other cities across the planet. "It's like a giant machine," Zareth whispered to his team. "The whole planet is running itself." The discovery that shocked them most came in the deepest levels of the complex. Room after room filled with sleeping pods, just like the ones Admiral Kextar had found in the hidden facility. But these weren't empty. Each pod contained a human in perfect suspended animation. "How many are there?" asked Sergeant Kilmar. "One of Zareth's soldiers." "We've counted over 100,000 so far, and we've only searched a small section," Zareth replied. "If every city on this planet has a complex like this..." The implications were staggering. Terra Nova alone might contain millions of sleeping humans, all perfectly preserved and waiting for something. But waiting for what? Their answer came when Sergeant Kilmar accidentally brushed against one of the computer interfaces while trying to steady himself. The touch activated something, and suddenly the entire complex came to life. Lights began flashing, computer screens displayed streams of data, and a calm voice began speaking in perfect galactic standard. "Unauthorized presence detected in restricted area," the voice announced. "Foreign biological signatures identified as non-human. Initiating security protocols." The Coalition soldiers grabbed their weapons, expecting automated defenses to attack them. But nothing happened. The voice continued its calm announcements. "Scanning intruders for threat assessment. Analysis complete. Threat level determined to be moderate. Initiating awakening protocols for local population. Estimated time to full activation, 72 hours. "What does that mean?" Kilmar asked, nervously. Before anyone could answer, the sleeping pods around them began to hum with increased activity. The life support systems that had been running at minimal power for centuries started to increase their output. Whatever process kept the humans in suspended animation was beginning to reverse itself. "We need to get out of here," Zareth said. "Now." But as they tried to leave, they discovered that the way they had come in was blocked. Not by physical barriers, but by energy fields that their equipment couldn't penetrate. The voice continued its announcements, now adding new information. Evacuation of unauthorized personnel will be permitted after local security forces are activated. Please remain calm and await escort to the surface. Local security forces? Zareth asked. What local security forces? The answer came in the form of mechanical sounds from deeper in the complex. Something large was moving through the tunnels, heading in their direction. The Coalition soldiers had advanced weapons and armor, but they were trapped underground in an alien facility with unknown defenses. Captain Mordak received Zareth's distress signal just as similar reports started coming in from scout teams across the planet. Every major city had underground complexes. Every complex was starting to wake up, and every team that had gone underground was now trapped inside. Sir, we're detecting massive energy increases all across the planet, reported the tactical officer. Whatever these complexes are doing, they're drawing power from sources we can't locate. Mordak stared at the planet below. This was supposed to be a simple investigation of an abandoned world. Instead, they had triggered something that had been waiting for 3 centuries. The calm voice they had heard mentioned awakening protocols and security forces. If even a fraction of the sleeping humans were soldiers. Send a message to Coalition headquarters, Mordak ordered. Tell them we've made contact with human automated systems. Tell them the humans aren't extinct. What should we do about our teams on the surface, sir? Mordak looked at the data streaming from the planet. Energy signatures were growing stronger by the hour. The awakening process was accelerating. Whatever was sleeping down there would be awake soon, and he had no idea what it would do when it found Coalition soldiers in its territory. We wait, he said finally, and we hope that 300 years of sleep has made them more reasonable than the old stories suggest. But deep in his heart, Mordak suspected that hope was all they had left. Jake Morrison opened his eyes for the first time in 300 years. The world came back to him slowly, like surfacing from the deepest ocean. His body felt strange, as if he had been sleeping for a very long time, which was exactly what had happened. The hibernation pod around him was filled with warm, breathable fluid that had kept him alive while he slept. As the revival process continued, the fluid drained away and fresh air flowed into the chamber. Jake took his first real breath in centuries and found that it felt completely natural. Revival complete, said a calm computer voice. Welcome back, Captain Morrison. The date is March 15th, 2387. You have been in hibernation for 312 years, 4 months, and 16 days. Jake sat up slowly, his military training helping him stay calm despite the incredible situation. He had been a captain in the Human Colonial Defense Force before the Great Sleep began. Now he was apparently still a captain, but in a world that had moved on without him. Computer, why was I awakened? He asked. Automated security protocols detected unauthorized alien presence on Terra Nova. As ranking military officer for this sector, you have been activated to assess and respond to potential threats. Jake stepped out of the pod and found that his body felt perfectly normal. The hibernation technology had preserved him flawlessly. Around him, other pods were beginning to open. Men and women he had known centuries ago were waking up to the same strange new reality. Jake? Jake Morrison? A familiar voice called out. He turned to see Dr. Linda Hayes stepping out of her own pod. She had been the colony's chief medical officer before they went to sleep. Is it really over? Are we really awake? Looks like it, Jake replied, though I'm not sure why yet. More people were waking up around them. Paul Carter, the chief engineer, Susan Walsh, the communications specialist, Alex Turner, the colonial administrator. All of them looked exactly as they had 3 centuries ago, preserved perfectly by the hibernation technology. "Computer," Jake called out, "show us what's happening on the surface." The chamber's walls lit up with displays showing the surface of Terra Nova. Coalition ships filled the sky, and alien soldiers were exploring the empty cities above. Jake felt a cold anger rising in his chest. After 300 years of peaceful sleep, aliens had come to their world uninvited. "How many of them are there?" asked Linda. "Current count shows 50 capital ships in orbit and approximately 5,000 ground personnel distributed across 12 major cities," the computer replied. "All are of non-human origin and are operating without authorization from human authorities." Paul Carter was studying the technical displays. "Computer, what's the status of our defense systems?" "All automated systems remain fully operational. Manufacturing facilities have continued to operate and improve during the hibernation period. Current technology level exceeds pre-hibernation capabilities by approximately 400%. Jake felt a mix of pride and concern. Humanity had chosen hibernation not because they were weak, but because they were too strong. Their technology had been advancing so rapidly that they feared they might destroy themselves or others. The decision to sleep while their automated systems continued to develop had been a way to avoid that fate. "What about the other colonies?" Susan asked. The computer displayed a map of human space. Lights began appearing across hundreds of worlds. "Awakening protocols have been initiated on all major human settlements. Current estimate shows approximately 200 million humans will be fully active within 72 hours. 200 million. Jake let that number sink in. When humanity had gone to sleep, their total population had been around 50 million spread across their colonies. Either the computer was wrong or something incredible had happened during their long rest. "Computer, explain the population increase. During hibernation, automated systems have continued colony expansion and development programs. Birth rates have been maintained through artificial reproduction and child-rearing protocols. All new citizens have been educated and prepared for eventual awakening." Jake stared at the displays. While they slept, their machines had been building an entire civilization. Cities had been expanded, new colonies had been established, and the human population had grown 4 times larger. All of it managed by artificial intelligence systems that had continued to improve and develop for 3 centuries. "Show us the current state of galactic affairs," Linda requested. What they saw was not encouraging. The galaxy had become more violent and chaotic since humanity's withdrawal. Multiple wars had been fought between alien species. The Galactic Council that had once maintained peace was now weak and divided. The coalition that had invaded Terra Nova was just one of several aggressive military powers that had emerged. "So they think we're extinct or helpless," Paul observed, "and they've decided to help themselves to our territory." "That was their mistake," Jake said grimly. "Computer, what are our current capabilities?" The answer was impressive. Human technology had advanced far beyond what any current galactic civilization possessed. Their ships could manipulate space and time in ways that seemed impossible. Their weapons could reorganize matter at the molecular level. Their defensive systems could make entire planets invisible or untouchable. But more importantly, the humans who were waking up were not the same people who had gone to sleep. The computer had spent 3 centuries analyzing human behavior, warfare, and psychology. Every person awakening had been given knowledge and training that made them far more capable than they had been before hibernation. "Jake," Susan called out, "we're getting communications from other awakening sites. Do you want to coordinate our response?" Jake nodded. As the ranking military officer for this sector, he was responsible for dealing with the invasion. But this was bigger than just Terra Nova. This was about humanity's return to galactic affairs after centuries of absence. Over the next few hours, Jake found himself in communication with awakening leaders across human space. General Lisa Thompson was coordinating military responses from the core worlds. Dr. Robert Kane was overseeing the reactivation of industrial facilities. Admiral Karen Davis was preparing the human fleet for possible action. All of them reported the same thing. The aliens had made a serious mistake. They had violated human territory during humanity's most vulnerable moment. By galactic law and human tradition, this was an act of war. But Jake also knew that humanity had chosen isolation for good reasons. They had the power to destroy civilizations, but they also had the wisdom to restrain themselves. The question now was whether they could respond to this invasion without becoming the monsters they had tried to avoid becoming. "Computer," Jake said finally, "open communications with the alien fleet in orbit." "Channel open, Captain." Jake looked directly into the camera that would carry his image to the coalition ships above. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried the authority of someone who represented 200 million awakening humans. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Human Colonial Defense Force. You are in violation of human territory and the Galactic Non-Interference Treaty. You have 1 hour to withdraw all forces and return to your own space. This is your only warning, the all." Communication ended, leaving silence in the underground chamber. Around him, other humans were checking weapons and preparing for whatever came next. After 300 years of sleep, humanity was awake again, and they were not happy about being disturbed. Captain Mordak stared at the communication screen in disbelief. The human who had just spoken to him looked completely ordinary. Medium height, brown hair, calm expression. Nothing about Jake Morrison suggested he was particularly dangerous, but something about his voice made Mordak's skin crawl. "Sir, what should we respond?" asked his communications officer. Mordak thought carefully. One human, recently awakened from centuries of sleep, was demanding that a fleet of 50 warships leave immediately. It should have been ridiculous. Instead, it felt like a very serious threat. "Send a message to Coalition headquarters," Mordak ordered. "Tell them we've made contact with active human forces. Request immediate reinforcement." "What about the humans' demand that we leave?" "We ignore it," Mordak said, though he didn't sound entirely confident. "We're here on a legitimate exploration mission. One human doesn't get to order around the Coalition fleet." But even as he spoke, Mordak could see that things on the planet below were changing rapidly. Energy readings were spiking across all the major cities. New facilities were coming online every hour. Whatever awakening process the humans had started was accelerating beyond their initial estimates. Admiral Kextar, who had been quietly observing from his own ship, sent a private message to Mordak. "Captain, I strongly recommend you reconsider. My archaeological research suggests that humans are not to be taken lightly." "With respect, Admiral, archaeological research is not the same as current reality," Mordak replied. "These humans have been sleeping for 3 centuries. They're outnumbered and outgunned. We have 50 ships and they have, what? 1 awakened colony?" What Mordak didn't know was that Jake Morrison was no longer alone. Across Terra Nova, millions of humans were waking up. And across human space, hundreds of worlds were experiencing the same awakening. The hibernation had been designed so that if one colony was threatened, all of them would wake up together. On the surface of Terra Nova, Jake Morrison was meeting with his newly awakened team in what had once been the colonial government building. The structure looked the same as it had 3 centuries ago, but the technology inside was far more advanced. "Status report," Jake requested. Dr. Linda Hayes consulted her medical displays. "All awakening protocols are proceeding normally. We'll have full population revival within 48 hours. That's about 12 million people on Terra Nova alone." Paul Carter was studying engineering reports. "Our manufacturing facilities have been busy while we slept. We have weapons and vehicles that didn't exist when we went into hibernation. Some of this technology is, well, it's incredible." "Show me," Jake said. Paul activated a holographic display that showed the current state of human military capability. Jake whistled softly as he saw the specifications. Human ships could now phase through solid matter, making them nearly impossible to target. Human weapons could disrupt the molecular bonds of any material, essentially dissolving enemy equipment. Human armor could adapt to any type of attack in real time. "The automated systems have been learning and improving for 300 years, Paul explained. "They've run millions of simulations and built prototypes that we never imagined. We're not just more advanced than when we went to sleep. We're more advanced than anything currently existing in the galaxy." Susan Walsh interrupted with an urgent communication. "Jake, we're getting reports from other awakening colonies. The Coalition has sent forces to investigate dozens of our worlds. They think this is just an isolated incident." Jake felt his anger growing. The aliens hadn't just violated one human world, they had launched a systematic invasion of human space. This wasn't exploration or diplomacy. This was conquest. "Computer," Jake called out. "What are the current rules of engagement for defending human territory?" "Current protocols allow for graduated response to territorial violations," the computer replied. "Step 1, diplomatic warning. Step 2, demonstration of capability. Step 3, active defense. Step 4, total warfare." "We've completed Step 1, Jake observed. "The aliens haven't responded to our warning. Initiate Step 2. What happened next was carefully calculated to send a message without causing unnecessary death. A single human ship rose from Terra Nova's surface. It was sleek and black, unlike anything the Coalition had ever seen. As it approached the orbital fleet, Captain Mordak ordered his ships to intercept it. "Unknown vessel, you are outnumbered 50-1, Mordak transmitted. "Surrender immediately or we will open fire." The human ship didn't respond with words. Instead, it simply vanished. "Where did it go?" Mordak demanded. "Sir, it's inside our formation," the tactical officer reported in a shaky voice. "It just appeared between our ships without using any kind of propulsion we can detect." The human ship was now floating in the exact center of the Coalition fleet. If it chose to explode, it would take out half their forces. If it chose to attack, it could destroy several ships before they could react. But it didn't do either of those things. Instead, it began transmitting a signal that took control of every Coalition ship's communication system. Jake Morrison's face appeared on every screen in the fleet. "I am Captain Jake Morrison, representing the awakening human colonies," he said calmly. "You have ignored our diplomatic warning. This is your demonstration of our current capabilities. You are completely at our mercy right now. We could destroy your entire fleet without losing a single human life." To prove his point, the human ship reached out with some kind of energy beam and touched one of the Coalition vessels. The alien ship didn't explode or disappear. Instead, all of its weapons and engines simply stopped working. The molecular bonds holding them together had been disrupted just enough to make them useless without actually destroying them. "Your ship is now defenseless," Jake continued. "We can do this to your entire fleet whenever we choose. This is Step 2 of our defensive protocols. Step 3 involves active military resistance. Step 4 involves the complete mobilization of human civilization for total warfare. You do not want to see Steps 3 or 4. Captain Mordak felt sweat running down his face despite the cool air on his bridge. One human ship had penetrated. His formation disabled one of his vessels and demonstrated technology that made his entire fleet obsolete. And this was supposedly just a demonstration. "I will transmit your demands to Coalition leadership," Mordak said finally. "You have 24 hours," Jake replied. "If Coalition forces are not withdrawing from all human territory by then, we will assume you have chosen military conflict over diplomatic resolution." The human ship vanished again, reappearing near Terra Nova's surface before descending to land. The Coalition fleet was left floating in space, one ship disabled and the rest wondering if they were already dead without knowing it. Mordak immediately sent an urgent message to Coalition headquarters, but the response he received was not what he expected. "The Coalition Council has decided that human technology, while impressive, represents a threat to galactic security," came the official reply. "You are ordered to establish permanent Coalition bases on all human worlds and bring human technology under Coalition control. Reinforcements are being sent to support this operation." Admiral Kextar, monitoring the communications, sent another private message to Mordak. "Captain, I have studied human history extensively. When they say total warfare, they mean something very different from what we understand. I strongly urge you to convince the Coalition to reconsider." But Mordak's orders were clear. Instead of withdrawing, he was supposed to establish permanent bases and seize human technology. Looking at the readings from Terra Nova, where millions of humans were now awake and active, Mordak realized he was about to find out exactly what human total warfare looked like, and he suspected it would be the last thing he ever learned. Jake Morrison stood in the command center of New Geneva, watching displays that showed the situation across human space. What he saw both impressed and worried him. The Coalition had not just ignored their warning, they had doubled down on their invasion by sending more ships to human worlds. "Status report from all sectors," Jake requested. General Lisa Thompson appeared on the main screen from the human core world of New Earth. She was a tall woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much combat. "Jake, we have Coalition forces attempting to establish bases on 47 human worlds. Their reinforcement fleets are massive, over 2,000 ships total. Dr. Robert Kane's image joined the conference from the industrial world of New Pittsburgh. The good news is that our manufacturing systems are fully online. We can produce whatever we need for defense. The bad news is that the Coalition seems to think they can take our technology by force." Admiral Karen Davis spoke from the orbital shipyards above New Earth. "Our fleet is ready for deployment. We have 600 ships of the newest design, plus about 2,000 older vessels that have been upgraded during the hibernation period." Jake studied the numbers. Even with their technological advantages, they were outnumbered more than 3 to 1. But then, humans had always been good at overcoming bad odds. "What's the word from Galactic Command?" Jake asked. "The Elder Council is in emergency session," General Thompson replied. Ambassador Thylaran has been trying to convince the Coalition to withdraw, but their leadership seems convinced that we're either extinct or helpless. They think our demonstration at Terra Nova was some kind of trick. Jake shook his head. 3 centuries of peace had made the galaxy forget what humans were truly capable of when threatened. They were about to receive a very unpleasant reminder. "Computer," Jake called out, "initiate Phase 3 defensive protocols. Full activation of all human military assets." Acknowledged. Phase 3 protocols now active. All human colonies are now in active defense mode. Across human space, changes began happening with incredible speed. Cities that had looked empty and peaceful suddenly came alive with activity. Hidden factories began producing war materials. Ships that had been sleeping in underground hangars powered up and prepared for launch. Most importantly, the full human population was now awake and aware of the threat they faced. The first major engagement happened at New Austin, a human colony world that the Coalition had chosen as a primary target for establishing their occupation. Force. Commander Steve Rogers was the ranking human officer there, a man who had been a fighter pilot before the Great Sleep. "Coalition fleet approaching from the outer system," reported his tactical officer. "Count shows 80 ships, including 12 heavy cruisers." Steve looked at his own force. 5 human ships that had been hidden in the asteroid belt around New Austin. On paper, it was hopeless. In reality, it was about to become a textbook example of why humans had terrified the galaxy 3 centuries. Ago. All ships maintain stealth mode until they're committed to their attack run, Steve ordered. Let them think this will be easy. The Coalition fleet approached New Austin confidently. Their scans showed minimal defenses and only a few orbital platforms that appeared to be civilian installations. Captain Velketh, commanding the Coalition force, had been told to expect token resistance at best. "Begin landing operations," Velketh ordered. "Establish bases in the major population centers and secure any technology installations." That's when Steve Rogers decided to introduce the Coalition to modern human warfare. The 5 human ships dropped their stealth fields and appeared in the middle of the Coalition formation. But instead of attacking immediately, they began something that looked like an elaborate dance. Moving in perfect coordination, they weaved between the alien ships while energy beams lanced out to touch various targets. "What are they doing?" Velketh demanded. "They're not even firing at us properly." What the Coalition didn't understand was that the human ships weren't trying to destroy their targets. They were reprogramming them. Each energy beam was actually a sophisticated hacking device that took control of Coalition ship systems. Within minutes, half the Coalition fleet was no longer under Coalition control. "Sir, our ships are turning against us!" The Coalition tactical officer screamed. Steve Rogers appeared on the Coalition fleet's communication system. "This is Commander Rogers of the Human Defense Force. Your ships are now under our control. Your weapons will not fire on human targets, your engines will only take you away from human space, and your life support will function normally as long as you don't try to override our control." "This is impossible," Captain Velketh protested. "You can't just take control of our ships." "We're not taking control," Steve corrected. "We're offering you a choice. Leave human space now with your crews alive and your ships functional, or stay and discover what Phase 4 of our defensive protocols looks like." The Coalition ships that were still under their own control tried to fight back. They fired everything they had at the human vessels. The energy beams and missiles that should have destroyed the human ships simply passed through them as if they weren't there. "Phase shift technology," Steve explained casually. "We can exist slightly outside normal space-time when we choose to. Your weapons can't touch us, but ours can still affect you. To demonstrate, One of the human ships reached out and touched a Coalition heavy cruiser. The massive warship simply vanished, not destroyed, but transported somewhere else entirely. "Where did you send them?" Velketh asked. "About 50 light-years away from here," Steve replied. "They're perfectly safe, but it will take them several months to get home. Now, what's your decision? Leave voluntarily or be relocated involuntarily?" The remaining Coalition ships chose to leave voluntarily. News of the battle at New Austin spread quickly through both human and Coalition networks. For humans, it was proof that their centuries of technological development had paid off. For the Coalition, it was a terrifying demonstration that they had seriously underestimated their opponents. But the Coalition leadership refused to accept defeat. Instead of withdrawing, they authorized the use of planet-killing weapons against human worlds. If they couldn't occupy human territory, they would destroy it. This decision marked the end of Phase 3 and the beginning of Phase 4. Dr. Amy Foster, working from the human research world of New Cambridge, had been monitoring Coalition communications. When she detected the authorization for genocide weapons, she immediately contacted Jake Morrison. "They've crossed the line," she reported grimly. "They're planning to destroy entire human worlds rather than admit they can't beat us." Jake felt a cold rage settle over him. The Coalition had moved beyond invasion and occupation to attempted genocide. Under human law and galactic treaty, this authorized the most extreme response possible. "All human forces," Jake transmitted across their communication network. "The Coalition has authorized genocide weapons against human civilians. This constitutes a crime against sentient life under galactic law. We are now authorized to use any means necessary to protect human territory and eliminate the threat to our people." "What does that mean in practical terms?" asked General Thompson. Jake looked at the tactical displays showing Coalition fleets approaching dozens of human worlds with planet-killer weapons. "It means we stop holding back. It means the galaxy is about to remember why the old treaties existed, and it means the Coalition is about to learn what total human warfare actually looks like." The awakening was complete. 200 million humans were now active across hundreds of worlds. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything the galaxy had seen, and they were no longer interested in demonstrations or warnings. The Coalition had wanted a war. Now they were going to get one. The first sign that everything had changed came when the Coalition fleet approaching New Berlin simply vanished. Not destroyed, not captured. They were just gone. One moment, 50 Coalition warships were moving toward the human colony world, and the next moment the space they had occupied was completely empty. Admiral Vortek, commanding the Coalition's main battle fleet, received the report with growing panic. "What do you mean they vanished? Ships don't just disappear." "Sir, long-range sensors show no debris, no energy signatures, nothing," his communications officer reported. "It's like they never existed." The truth was that the Coalition fleet had been transported en masse to the edge of the galaxy, about 30,000 light-years from their intended target. They were alive and their ships were functional, but it would take them several years to return to Coalition space. The humans had decided that quick relocation was more efficient than destruction. Admiral Karen Davis was coordinating the human response from her flagship, the Endeavor. Unlike the bulky, heavily armored ships preferred by other species, human vessels were sleek and elegant, looking more like works of art than weapons of war. "Status report from all battle groups," Karen requested. Commander Chris Evans reported from the 2nd Battle Group. "We've successfully relocated Coalition Fleet 7 to the Magellanic Clouds. No casualties on either side. They seemed confused, but grateful to be alive. Captain Lisa Turner from the third group had a different report. Coalition Fleet 12 refused relocation and attempted to fire planet killer weapons at New Dublin. We were forced to take more direct action. Define. Direct action, Karen said. We turned their weapons back on themselves. Their own planet killer torpedoes are now orbiting their flagship in a stable pattern. If they try to leave or attack anyone, the torpedoes will automatically detonate. They're effectively trapped until they agree to withdraw from human space. Admiral, Karen smiled grimly. Human military doctrine had always emphasized creativity and psychological warfare over brute force. Why destroy an enemy when you could make them defeat themselves? But not all coalition forces were willing to accept creative solutions. The Korthak Empire, proud and aggressive, had decided that retreat was worse than death. Admiral Zektar commanded their primary battle fleet of 300 ships, and he was determined to prove that human technology could be overcome by superior numbers and firepower. All ships, focus fire on the human vessels, Zektar ordered, as his fleet engaged the human 4th Battle Group near New Tokyo. They can't phase shift forever. Eventually, they'll have to become solid to attack us. What Zektar didn't understand was that human phase shift technology didn't work the way he thought it did. Human ships could exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously, allowing them to be both intangible and capable of affecting normal space at the same time. General Chris Evans, commanding the 4th Battle Group, decided to give the Korthaks a demonstration of advanced human warfare. All ships activate dimensional cascade weapons, target their flagship. The Endeavor fired what looked like a simple energy beam at the Korthak flagship. When the beam hit, something extraordinary happened. The massive alien ship began to exist in multiple dimensions at once, creating dozens of copies of itself scattered across local space. Each copy was real, but they were all the same ship existing in parallel realities. "What have you done to us?" Admiral Zektar screamed as his consciousness was spread across multiple versions of himself. "We've given you a taste of multi-dimensional existence," Chris replied calmly. "Don't worry, it's not permanent. The effect will wear off in about 6 months. Until then, you'll get to experience what it's like to be a truly advanced species. The prey psychological impact on the rest of the Korthak fleet was devastating. Watching their flagship exist in dozens of dimensions simultaneously, while their admiral's voice echoed from multiple realities, was more than most minds could handle. Within hours, the entire Korthak fleet had surrendered. But the most impressive display of human capability came from Dr. Amy Foster's research team. When coalition forces threatened the human colony world of New Geneva with a biological weapon designed to kill all human life, Amy's response was to remake the planet's entire atmosphere in real time. Deploying atmospheric reconstruction protocols, Amy announced as her research ship approached New Geneva. Estimated completion time: 4 hours. What happened next defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about planetary engineering. Amy's ship released billions of nanoscale machines that spread through New Geneva's atmosphere. These machines began converting the air itself into a barrier that would neutralize any biological weapon while remaining perfectly safe for human life. But Amy didn't stop there. The nanomachines also began improving the planet's ecosystem, eliminating pollution, optimizing weather patterns, and even upgrading the soil composition to support better agriculture. In 4 hours, New Geneva was transformed from a typical colony world into something approaching paradise. The coalition forces watching from orbit were stunned. They had threatened to poison a planet, and the humans had responded by making it better than it had ever been before. How is this possible? Captain Mordak asked, watching the transformation from his ship above Terra Nova. Jake Morrison, now serving as the primary human military coordinator, answered the question during a galaxy-wide broadcast. For 300 years, our automated systems have been developing technology that your species would consider impossible. We can manipulate matter and energy at the quantum level. We can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. We can remake entire worlds in hours rather than centuries. But most importantly, Jake continued, we have learned to do all of this without losing our humanity. We could have conquered the galaxy 3 centuries ago. We chose not to. We could destroy every coalition world right now. We're choosing not to. But we will defend ourselves and our territory with whatever force is necessary. The demonstration of human capabilities was having its intended effect. Coalition forces across the galaxy were surrendering rather than face the impossible technology. They couldn't understand or counter. But the coalition leadership, driven by pride and desperation, made one final, terrible decision. Commander Zolthek, the architect of the invasion, authorized the use of reality-warping weapons against human space. These ancient devices could unravel the fundamental laws of physics in localized areas, essentially erasing anything caught in their effect from existence itself. It was the ultimate escalation, and it forced humanity to respond with their own ultimate weapons. President Dan Miller, speaking from the human capital of New Washington, made the announcement that would end the war. The coalition has chosen to use weapons that threaten the stability of space-time itself. This constitutes an existential threat not just to humanity, but to all life in the galaxy. We are therefore authorized to deploy Class 0 containment protocols. Nobody in the galaxy, including most humans, knew what Class 0 protocols were. They were about to find out. Across human space, reality itself began to change. The laws of physics in human territory became flexible. Coalition ships that entered human space found that their engines worked differently. Their weapons fired backwards, and their life support systems produced flowers instead of breathable air. More disturbing was what happened to coalition worlds that had supported the invasion. Their gravity began working in random directions. Their suns started changing colors. Their moons began orbiting in impossible patterns that spelled out messages in human languages. The coalition empire didn't just collapse, it became too confused. To function as its own reality betrayed it. Within a week, every coalition world was begging for surrender. The war was over, but the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had demonstrated that they weren't just technologically superior. They had become something approaching gods in their ability to manipulate the fundamental nature of reality itself. And they had done it all while maintaining their essential humanity and their commitment to protecting life rather than destroying it. The war ended not with explosions or final battles, but with silence. Across the galaxy, coalition fleets simply stopped fighting. Their weapons wouldn't work properly, their ships barely functioned, and their commanders could no longer tell which way was up in the twisted reality that human technology had created around them. President Dan Miller stood on the steps of the rebuilt Terran embassy on Nexus Prime, the former coalition capital. The building around him had been reconstructed in a matter of hours by human engineering teams, transforming the militaristic fortress into something that looked more like a garden than a government building. Before him sat the remnants of galactic leadership. Admiral Vortek, who had once commanded the coalition's mighty fleet, now wore simple civilian clothes and could barely make eye contact. Commander Zolthek, the architect of the invasion, sat with his head in his hands, still trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. Captain Mordak, who had led the first exploration into human space, looked older than his years. "The war is over," President Miller announced, his voice carrying to every world in the galaxy through human communication networks. "The Coalition. Surrender has been accepted. But this is not the end. It is the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history." Ambassador Thelaran of the Ancients sat in the front row, his 800-year-old eyes filled with a mixture of relief and sadness. He had tried to warn them, but the younger species had refused to listen. Now they would face the consequences of their arrogance. "The damage done to galactic civilization is extensive," President Miller continued. "The Coalition's aggressive expansion has destabilized dozens of star systems. Their use of reality-warping weapons has created dangerous anomalies that threaten all life in affected areas. The economic and social chaos they created will take decades to repair." Admiral Karen Davis stepped forward with a detailed report. "Our assessment teams have surveyed all former Coalition territory. We found evidence of slavery on 17 worlds, genocide attempts on 8 more, and ecological destruction on over 100 planets. The Coalition leadership systematically violated every principle of civilized behavior." The former Coalition leaders shifted uncomfortably as the full extent of their crimes was laid out for everyone to see. What had started as territorial expansion had become a reign of terror that had made life miserable for billions of innocent civilians. "However," President Miller said, and his tone suggested that mercy was still possible, "humanity does not seek revenge. We seek justice and stability. The guilty will be held accountable, but we will not punish entire species for the mistakes of their leaders." General Lisa Thompson presented the human plan for galactic reconstruction. "Former Coalition territory will be placed under human protection for a period of 50 years. During this time, we will work to rebuild damaged civilizations, restore destroyed ecosystems, and establish new governments based on principles of cooperation rather than conquest." "What about our sovereignty?" asked Admiral Vortek, speaking, for the first time since the surrender. Jake Morrison, now serving as human ambassador to the reformed Galactic Council, answered the question. "Your sovereignty will be restored when you prove you can exercise it responsibly. The galaxy trusted you with independence once, and you used it to launch wars of conquest and attempted genocide. Trust must be earned back." The terms of the peace were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of imposing harsh punishments or extracting tribute, humanity offered to share their advanced technology with species that demonstrated peaceful intentions. Worlds that had been devastated by Coalition aggression would be restored to better condition than they had been before the war. But there were also strict new rules. No species would be allowed to develop weapons capable of destroying planets or manipulating reality. Aggressive expansion was prohibited. Any species that threatened others would face immediate human intervention. Dr. Robert Kane explained the monitoring system that would enforce these rules. "We have established observation posts throughout the galaxy. These stations can detect any technological development that might threaten galactic peace. We can also intervene instantly if any species begins to develop dangerous capabilities." "You're making yourselves the rulers of the galaxy," protested Commander Zolthek. "No," President Miller replied firmly. "We're making ourselves the guardians of the galaxy. There's a difference. We don't want to rule other species. We want to prevent them from destroying themselves and each other." The distinction was important, but it was also subtle. In practical terms, humanity had become the ultimate authority in galactic affairs. No major decision could be made without considering human approval. No military force could be deployed without human oversight. No technological development could proceed without human monitoring. Captain Mordak, who had spent months witnessing human capabilities firsthand, stood to address the assembly. I have seen what humans are capable of when they choose to act. They could have destroyed us all. Instead, they offered mercy to species that had invaded their territory and threatened their civilians. But let no one mistake this mercy for weakness. He gestured to the transformed city around them. They rebuilt our capital in hours. They turned our weapons against us without firing a shot. They manipulated reality itself to defeat our armies. And they did all of this while ensuring that civilian casualties were kept to an absolute minimum. The lesson is clear, Mordak continued. Humanity chose isolation 3 centuries ago not because they were weak, but because they were strong enough to recognize the danger they represented. We forced them to abandon that isolation. The consequences are our responsibility. Ambassador Thylaran finally spoke, his ancient voice carrying the weight of centuries. I have lived through many ages of galactic history. I have seen empires rise and fall, species evolve and go extinct, technologies develop and disappear. But I have never seen anything like what humanity has accomplished. They had the power to reshape reality itself, and they used it to protect life rather than destroy it. They could have become conquerors or destroyers. Instead, they chose to become gardeners, nurturing civilizations that had tried to destroy them. The old ambassador looked directly at the former coalition leaders. You awakened something that chose to sleep for the good of all. You forced angels to become warriors. The price of that arrogance will be paid by every species in the galaxy for generations to come. As the ceremony concluded, the former coalition worlds began their transformation under human guidance. Devastated planets were healed. Enslaved populations were freed. Corrupt governments were replaced with systems designed to serve their people rather than exploit them. But the most significant change was psychological. Every species in the galaxy now knew that humanity was watching. Any act of aggression, any attempt at conquest, any development of dangerous technology would be met with immediate and overwhelming response. The age of galactic warfare was over. Humanity had seen to that. Jake Morrison remained on Terra Nova, serving as the human representative to the outer colonies. As he stood in the same command center where he had first awakened to find aliens invading his world, he reflected on how much had changed. Computer, he said, status report on galactic stability. All sectors reporting peaceful conditions, the computer replied. No conflicts detected. No aggressive military buildups observed, no development of prohibited technologies registered, and human casualties from the entire war? Total human military casualties, 0 fatalities, 14 minor injuries. Jake nodded. That had been the goal from the beginning, to end the threat without becoming the monsters they had tried to avoid becoming. They had succeeded, but the cost had been their isolation. Humanity was now responsible for the peace and stability of the entire galaxy. Computer, what's the status of our hibernation facilities? All systems remain operational and ready for reactivation if desired. Jake looked out at the stars visible through the command center windows. Somewhere out there, 200 million humans were working to rebuild a galaxy that had forgotten how to live in peace. It was noble work, necessary work, but it was also exactly what they had tried to avoid 3 centuries ago. Maybe someday we can sleep again, Jake said quietly. when the galaxy has learned to take care of itself. But he suspected that day was still a long way off. The one rule, don't wake the humans, had been broken. Now humanity would have to stay awake to make sure it was never broken again. The price of the galaxy's arrogance would be paid in human freedom. They had wanted to sleep, but now they had to stand guard forever.